A woman walks into a bar and kisses a stranger on a dare. Seems harmless, right? Except the man she chose doesn't laugh it off. He doesn't forget. And when he tracks her down the next morning, she realizes that 5-second kiss just dragged her into a world she never knew existed. One where power isn't negotiated, it's taken. This is the story of Lena Carter, a woman who thought she was playing a game, until she met Adrian Voss, a man who doesn't play at all. If you want to see how far one reckless moment can go, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and let's begin. The bar smelled like spilled beer and bad decisions. Lena Carter sat wedged between her best friend Jess and a group of strangers who'd somehow convinced her that tonight was the night to do something stupid. The music was too loud, the lights were too dim, and the tequila had been too cheap to trust, but she'd had 3 shots anyway. "Come on, Lena," Jess said, grinning like the devil herself. "You said you wanted to shake things up. Well, here's your chance." Lena glanced at the dare scribbled on a crumpled napkin in front of her. "Kiss the most intimidating man in the room." She laughed. "This is ridiculous." "That's the point," Jess shot back. "You've been playing it safe for 2 years. Since Marcus left, you've been a ghost. So yeah, do something ridiculous. Do something that doesn't make sense. Kiss a stranger and remember what it feels like to be reckless." Lena hated that Jess was right. 2 years since her ex had walked out without explanation. 2 years of playing small, keeping her head down, building a life that felt more like a waiting room than an actual existence. She worked at a nonprofit that barely paid her bills, lived in an apartment that smelled like mildew, and hadn't been on a date in 14 months. She was 29 years old, and she felt 60. "Fine," Lena said, standing up before she could talk herself out of it. "But if I get slapped, I'm blaming you," Jess cackled. "Deal." Lena scanned the room, her pulse picking up speed. The bar was packed, college kids doing shots at the corner booth, a bachelorette party screaming near the jukebox, a handful of construction workers nursing beers by the dartboard. And then she saw him. He was standing near the far wall, half-shadowed, completely still. Tall, mid-30s maybe, dressed in a dark shirt that looked expensive even under the crappy neon lights. His posture was loose but controlled, like a man who didn't need to prove anything because everyone already knew. He wasn't drinking, wasn't talking, just watching. He looked like he didn't belong here, and that made him perfect. Lena's stomach flipped, but she forced herself forward. Jess was right. She needed to do something that didn't make sense, something that reminded her she was still alive. She crossed the room, weaving through the crowd, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The man didn't move, didn't react, but his eyes locked onto hers the moment she got within 10 feet. Dark eyes, steady, unreadable. She stopped in front of him, suddenly aware of how small she was compared to him, how ridiculous this whole thing was. But she'd come this far. "Hi," she said, barely audible over the noise. He tilted his head slightly. "Hi." His voice was low, calm, and somehow louder than the chaos around them. Lena swallowed. "I'm about to do something really stupid. Are you—" It wasn't a question. She stepped closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of cedar and something sharper, leather, maybe. Her hands were shaking, so she curled them into fists. "It's a dare," she said quickly. "I'm supposed to kiss the most intimidating man in the room, and you—" She gestured vaguely at him. "You win." He didn't smile, didn't blink, just watched her with the kind of attention that made her feel like she was under a microscope. "Do I get a say in this?" he asked. Lena hesitated. "Do you want one?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then he shifted, just slightly, leaning down so his face was level with hers. "Go ahead," he said quietly. Her breath caught, and then, before she could think herself out of it, Lena kissed him. It was supposed to be quick. A peck. Something she could laugh off in 5 seconds and walk away from. But the moment her lips touched his, something shifted. He didn't pull away, didn't move. But the air between them changed, like the entire room had suddenly stopped existing. His hand came up, slowly, deliberately, and rested against the side of her neck, his thumb brushing the edge of her jaw. Lena's entire body went still. The kiss lasted maybe 3 seconds, 4 at most. But when she pulled back, her heart was pounding like she'd just run a mile. He was still watching her, still completely calm. But there was something different in his eyes now, something sharp and focused, like she'd just done something she couldn't undo. "Thanks," Lena whispered, because she didn't know what else to say. He didn't respond. She turned and walked away, her legs shaky, her face burning. By the time she made it back to the table, Jess was practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh my God," Jess hissed. "Who was that?" "I have no idea," Lena said, grabbing her drink and downing the rest of it in one go. "Did you see the way he looked at you?" "He didn't look at me anyway. It was a dare, it's done." But even as she said it, Lena glanced back toward the wall. He was still standing there, still watching her, and she had the sudden, unsettling feeling that this wasn't over. Lena tried to forget about him. She really did. The next morning, she woke up with a headache, a vague sense of embarrassment, and the firm belief that last night had been exactly what it was supposed to be, a stupid, meaningless dare that she'd never think about again. She went to work, answered emails, sat through a meeting about donor outreach strategies, made herself a sad desk lunch and scrolled through her phone while she ate. Normal, boring, safe. But by 3 o'clock, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her. Not like she was a joke. Not like she was a stranger who'd done something weird. Like she mattered. It was unsettling. At 5:30, she left the office and headed toward the subway. The streets were crowded, the air thick with exhaust and street vendor smoke. She pulled her jacket tighter and kept her head down, lost in thought. And then she saw him. He was standing across the street, leaning against a black car, arms crossed, watching her. Lena froze. For a second, she thought she was imagining it, that her brain had conjured him out of guilt or curiosity or some weird post-dare anxiety. But no, it was him. Same dark eyes, same stillness, same presence that made the entire street feel smaller. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just waited. Lena's pulse spiked. She should walk away, get on the subway, pretend she didn't see him. Instead, she crossed the street. "Are you following me?" she asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Yes," he said simply. Lena blinked. "That's deeply concerning." "Is it?" Again, not a question. She crossed her arms. "Normal people don't track down strangers who kiss them at bars." "You're right," he said. "Normal people don't." "So what are you?" He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he pushed off the car and took a step closer. "Adrian Voss," he said. "And I'd like to take you to dinner." Lena stared at him. "You're joking." "I don't joke. You tracked me down to ask me to dinner?" "Yes." "That's insane." "Maybe." She should say no. She should turn around and leave and block whatever weird stalker energy this was. But instead, she heard herself ask, "Why?" Adrian tilted his head slightly, like he was deciding how much to say. "Because you walked up to me last night like you had nothing to lose," he said quietly, "and I want to know if that's true." Lena's breath hitched. "It was a dare," she said. "It didn't mean anything." "Didn't it?" The way he said it made her stomach twist. "I don't even know you," she said. "That's why I'm asking for dinner. I don't go to dinner with men who stalk me." "Then don't think of it as stalking," Adrian said. "Think of it as interest." Lena laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "You're unbelievable." "Probably." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. Plain white, no logo, just a phone number printed in black ink. "If you change your mind," he said, holding it out. Lena didn't take it. Adrian set it on the hood of the car and stepped back. "I'll be at 7th and Main tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. If you show up, I'll be there. If you don't," he shrugged, "I'll assume you weren't curious enough." Then he got into the car and drove away. Lena stood there for a long time, staring at the card. She told herself she wouldn't go. But the next night, at 7:45, she found herself standing outside a restaurant on 7th and Main, her hands shaking, her heart racing. And when she walked inside and saw Adrian sitting at a corner table, watching her like he'd known she'd come all along, She realized something terrifying. She wasn't just curious, she was hooked. Dinner was not what Lena expected. She'd braced herself for smooth talk, for games, for the kind of performative charm that men like Adrian, wealthy, controlled, impossibly self-assured, usually wielded like a weapon. But Adrian didn't perform. He asked questions, real ones. And then he listened. "What do you do?" he asked after they'd ordered. "I work at a non-profit," Lena said. "Community outreach, grant writing, boring stuff." "Do you like it?" She hesitated. "I used to." "And now?" "Now it feels like I'm running in place." Adrian nodded slowly. "What would you rather be doing?" No one had asked her that in years. "I don't know," Lena admitted. "I used to paint before I decided I needed to be responsible." "Why'd you stop?" "Because rent doesn't pay itself." "Fair," Adrian said, "but you didn't answer the question." Lena looked at him, caught off guard. "What question?" "What would you rather be doing?" She laughed softly. "I just told you. I don't know." "Then maybe you should figure it out." It should have sounded condescending, preachy, but the way he said it, calm, matter-of-fact, made it feel like permission instead. They talked for 2 hours, about everything, about nothing, about the kind of small, specific details that people usually skip over: favorite books, worst jobs, the exact moment you realize you've outgrown something. And the entire time, Adrian never broke eye contact, never checked his phone, never looked away. It was unnerving. It was intoxicating. By the time dessert arrived, Lena had forgotten to be nervous. "Can I ask you something?" she said, leaning forward. "Go ahead." "What do you do?" Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "I manage things," he said carefully. "That's vague." "It's accurate." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Are you being mysterious on purpose?" "Yes." She laughed. "Why?" "Because if I told you the truth right now, you'd leave." The honesty of it hit her like a punch. "That's not reassuring," Lena said quietly. "It's not meant to be." They sat in silence for a moment. "So what now?" Lena asked. "You're just going to keep being cryptic until I get curious enough to stay?" Adrian leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "I'm not trying to trap you, Lena. I'm trying to give you time." "Time for what?" "To decide if you want to know me." Her pulse quickened. "And if I don't?" "Then we finish dinner, and you never hear from me again." Lena's chest tightened. She should take the out, should thank him for dinner and walk away before this turned into something she couldn't control. But instead, she heard herself say, "I want to know you." Adrian's expression softened, just barely, just enough. "Then let's take this slow," he said. And for the first time in 2 years, Lena felt like she was stepping into something real. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena saw Adrian 4 more times. Coffee on a Tuesday morning, a walk through the park on Thursday, dinner again the following weekend. And then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, he took her to an art gallery she'd never heard of. Small, tucked away, filled with pieces that felt like they'd been painted just for her. He didn't try to kiss her, didn't push, didn't ask for anything she wasn't ready to give, but the tension between them grew sharper with every meeting. And Lena started to notice things. The way people stepped aside when Adrian walked into a room, the way waiters appeared the moment he so much as glanced in their direction, the way his phone would buzz and he'd silence it without even looking. He was careful, controlled, and completely, utterly deliberate. It should have been a red flag. But Lena couldn't bring herself to care, because when Adrian looked at her, she didn't feel small, didn't feel like she was playing a part. She felt seen. And that was more dangerous than anything else. On their 5th meeting, Adrian invited her to his place. "No pressure," he said. "Just dinner. I'll cook." Lena hesitated. "You cook?" "I do a lot of things." She should have said no, but she didn't. Adrian's apartment was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd expected cold, sterile, the kind of minimalist space that looked like a hotel, But instead, it was warm. Dark wood floors, soft lighting, bookshelves that actually looked used, a piano in the corner, a kitchen that smelled like garlic and rosemary. It felt lived in. It felt real. "This is not what I expected," Lena admitted, setting her bag down. Adrian glanced at her from the stove. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something more intimidating?" He smiled faintly. "I saved that for work." "Right. Your mysterious job." "Exactly." Lena wandered over to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. Philosophy, history, a few novels she recognized. "You actually read these?" she asked. "Why wouldn't I?" "I don't know. You don't seem like the type." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "What type do I seem like?" Lena turned to face him. "The type who doesn't need books to know things." He laughed, soft, genuine. "That's the nicest insult I've ever gotten." They ate on the couch, plates balanced on their laps, the city lights flickering through the window. And somewhere between the third glass of wine and the story about Adrian's terrible first apartment, Lena realized she was in trouble. Because she didn't just like him, she trusted him, and that was terrifying. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said, setting her glass down. "Always." "Why me?" Adrian looked at her, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could have anyone, so why are you here with me?" He didn't answer right away. And then, slowly, he set his own glass down and turned to face her fully. "Because you're not afraid of me," he said quietly. "And you should be." Lena's breath caught. "What does that mean?" Adrian reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "It means I'm not what you think I am, Lena. And eventually, you're going to have to decide if you can live with that." Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Then tell me," she whispered. "Tell me what you are." Adrian's jaw tightened, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "Not yet," he said. "Not until I know you're ready." Lena pulled her hand back, her chest tight. "That's not fair." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I don't want to lose you." The rawness in his voice stopped her cold. They sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. And then Lena did something reckless. She leaned forward and kissed him. Not because of a dare, not because she was trying to prove something, but because she wanted to. Adrian kissed her back, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she might disappear. And when they finally pulled apart, his forehead resting against hers, he whispered, "Stay." Lena's heart cracked open. "Okay," she breathed. And just like that, the line between them blurred completely. Lena woke up on Adrian's couch with sunlight streaming through the windows and her shoes still on. She blinked, disoriented, her head fuzzy from wine and the weight of everything that had happened the night before. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. She sat up slowly, her heart doing that stupid flutter thing it had been doing for weeks now, whenever she thought about him. Adrian was in the kitchen, standing at the counter with his back to her, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He was wearing dark jeans and a plain gray shirt, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. And he moved with the same deliberate calm he always had, like even making coffee required precision. Lena rubbed her face, trying to shake off the embarrassment of having fallen asleep mid-conversation like some lightweight who couldn't handle 3 glasses of wine. "Morning," Adrian said without turning around. "How did you know I was awake?" "You stopped breathing like you were asleep." Well, Lena's stomach did a weird flip. That's either really observant or really creepy. "Both, he said, turning to face her with a faint smile. He crossed the room and handed her one of the mugs. "You take it black, right?" She did, but she'd never told him that. "Lucky guess?" she asked, taking the mug. "Something like that." They stood there for a moment, the morning stretching between them in a way that felt both comfortable and charged. Lena took a sip of coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. "I should probably go, she said, even though she didn't want to. "You don't have to." "I have work." "It's Sunday." Lena paused. "Right." Adrian's mouth twitched. "You forgot." "I've had a lot on my mind." "I know." The way he said it, steady, knowing, made her chest tighten. She set the mug down on the coffee table and stood, suddenly needing space to think. "Adrian?" she started, then stopped, unsure how to finish. He waited, patient as always. "Last night," Lena continued, forcing herself to meet his eyes, "you said I should be afraid of you. What did you mean?" Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. "I meant exactly what I said." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now." Lena crossed her arms, frustration bubbling up. "You keep doing this. You say just enough to make me curious, but not enough to actually tell me anything. It's exhausting." "I know." "Then stop." Adrian stepped closer, his gaze locked on hers. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From me." The honesty of it hit her like a slap. Lena stared at him, her pulse racing. "I don't need protecting." "Yes, you do. That's not your call to make." Adrian's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly, like he was making a decision he didn't want to make. "Come with me," he said quietly. Lena frowned. "Where?" "Just trust me." She should have said no. Should have grabbed her bag and left and never looked back. But she didn't. Adrian drove them across the city in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression unreadable. Lena watched the streets blur past, her mind racing with questions she didn't know how to ask. They pulled up in front of a building she'd never seen before. Industrial, gray, tucked away in a part of town that looked like it hadn't been gentrified yet. Adrian parked and got out without a word. Lena followed. Inside, the building was cleaner than she'd expected. Polished floors, dim lighting, a few people in suits moving through the hallways with the kind of quiet efficiency that made her skin prickle. No one looked at Adrian, but everyone moved out of his way. "What is this place?" Lena asked, her voice low. "Somewhere I need you to see," Adrian said. He led her up a flight of stairs and through a heavy door into an office that overlooked the city. It was sparse, desk, chair, a few filing cabinets, but there was a tension in the air that made Lena's stomach knot. Adrian closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "I told you I managed things," he said. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Lena's pulse spiked. "What does that mean?" Adrian crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "It means I run an operation that most people don't know exists. And the people who do know, they either work for me or they stay out of my way." Lena's breath caught. "What kind of operation?" "The kind that keeps certain parts of this city functioning. The kind that handles problems other people can't or won't deal with." She stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "You're talking about crime. I'm talking about control. That's the same thing." "Not always." Lena took a step back, her mind spinning. "Are you telling me you're some kind of, what, crime boss, fixer, mob guy?" Adrian's expression didn't change. "I don't use those words, but if you need a label, sure, pick one." Her stomach dropped. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "Because you asked," Adrian said simply. "And because I don't want to lie to you." Lena's hands were shaking. She shoved them into her pockets, trying to steady herself. "So what now?" she asked. "You tell me all this, and then what? I'm just supposed to be okay with it?" "No," Adrian said quietly. "I'm giving you a choice. You can walk out that door right now, and I won't follow you. I won't call. I won't show up at your apartment. You'll never hear from me again." "And if I don't leave?" Adrian's gaze darkened. "Then you need to understand what staying means." Lena's chest tightened. "Which is?" "That my life isn't safe. That the people I deal with are dangerous. That being close to me puts you at risk." "So you're warning me off. I'm giving you the truth." Lena laughed, sharp, bitter. "You're unbelievable. I know." She turned away from him, staring out the window at the city below. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "I should leave," she said, more to herself than to him. "Probably." "This is insane." "Yes." Lena closed her eyes, trying to think, trying to breathe. But all she could feel was the weight of his honesty, the rawness of it, the fact that he'd just handed her every reason to run. and hadn't tried to stop her. She turned back to face him. "If I stay," she said slowly, "does that mean I'm part of this? Part of whatever you do?" "No," Adrian said firmly. "You're not part of it. You're separate. You're safe." "How can you promise that?" "Because I'll make sure of it." Lena shook her head. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." They stood there in silence, the air thick with everything unsaid. And then Lena did something she knew she'd regret. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. Adrian's expression cracked, just barely, just enough for her to see the relief beneath it. "You should," he said. "I know." "Lena, I'm not leaving," she repeated, louder this time. Adrian exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping. "Then we do this carefully, no rushing, no assumptions. And the second you change your mind, I'll tell you," Lena finished. He nodded. And just like that, the line between them shifted again. Over the next few weeks, Lena learned what it meant to live in Adrian's world without being part of it. He kept his promise. He didn't pull her into meetings or introduce her to people she didn't need to know, but she saw glimpses. Phone calls that ended the moment she walked into a room. Late nights when he'd disappear for hours and come back looking like he'd been holding the weight of something too heavy to name. And she noticed the way people watched him. Not with fear exactly, but with respect. The kind that came from knowing what someone was capable of. It should have scared her, but instead it made her curious. "Tell me something," Lena said one night as they sat on his couch, her legs tucked beneath her, his arm draped over the back of the cushions. "Like what? Why did you get into this? The managing things, the control, whatever you call it." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't choose it," he said finally. "It chose me." "That's dramatic." He smiled faintly. "It's true." "So what happened?" Adrian's gaze shifted to the window, his jaw tight. "I grew up in a place where the rules didn't apply, where people like me either learned to survive or got crushed. I learned. And now I make the rules." Lena studied him, her chest aching. "Do you like it?" Adrian looked at her, his expression unreadable. "It's all I know." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Lena reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You could do something else." "Could I?" "Yes." Adrian's grip tightened. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." He shook his head. "Not yet." Lena wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, but something in his eyes stopped her. So instead, she leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. And for the first time in weeks, Adrian let himself relax. But the peace didn't last. 2 days later, Lena was walking home from work when she noticed the car. Black, tinted windows, idling across the street from her apartment. She told herself it was nothing, just paranoia, just her brain playing tricks after everything Adrian had told her. But when she saw the same car the next day, and the day after that, she knew. "Adrian," she said that night, her voice tight. "I think someone's following me." Adrian went very still. "What did you see?" "A car. Black. Same one. 3 days in a row." His expression darkened. "License plate?" "I didn't get it." Adrian pulled out his phone and made a call. The conversation was brief, clipped, entirely in a language Lena didn't understand. When he hung up, his jaw was set. "You're staying here tonight," he said. "Adrian, Lena, you're staying here." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she could take care of herself, but the look in his eyes stopped her. "Who is it?" she asked quietly. Adrian didn't answer right away. "Someone who wants to make a point," he said finally. "What kind of point?" "The kind that involves you." Lena's stomach dropped. "Because of me? Or because of you?" Adrian's gaze softened. "Because of me." And just like that, everything changed. The next morning, Adrian's apartment felt different, tighter, like the walls were closing in. Lena sat at the kitchen counter, nursing coffee she didn't want, while Adrian paced near the window, his phone pressed to his ear. He'd been on calls all morning, his voice low and controlled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. When he finally hung up, he turned to face her. "I need you to trust me," he said. Lena's chest tightened. "What's going on?" "There's someone I need to deal with. Someone who thinks getting to you will get to me. And will it?" Adrian's jaw clenched. "Yes." Lena set her mug down, her hands shaking. "So what do we do?" "We don't do anything. I handle it." "That's not fair." "It's the only option." Lena stood, crossing her arms. "You don't get to decide that." "Yes, I do," Adrian said, his voice sharp. "Because this is my world, Lena, and I'm not letting you get hurt because of it." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you told me the truth." Adrian flinched. They stood there in silence, the weight of it pressing down between them. And then Adrian did something Lena didn't expect. He crossed the room, took her face in his hands, and kissed her, hard, desperate, like he was trying to say everything he couldn't put into words. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Lena's throat burned. "For what?" "For dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me," Lena said quietly. "I walked in on my own." Adrian's grip tightened. "Then walk out." "No." "Lena, I said no." He exhaled slowly, his eyes closing. "Then stay here," he said. "Don't leave. Don't answer the door. Don't go anywhere until I get back." "Where are you going?" "To fix this." And before Lena could argue, he was gone. She spent the next 6 hours pacing Adrian's apartment, her mind racing, her stomach in knots. She tried to distract herself, tried to read, to watch TV, to do anything that would keep her from imagining all the ways this could go wrong. But every time her phone buzzed, her heart stopped. It was almost midnight when Adrian finally came back. He looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie gone, and there was a tension in his face that made Lena's chest ache. "Is it done?" she asked. Adrian nodded. "It's done." "What does that mean?" "It means you're safe." Lena wanted to ask more, wanted to know what he'd done, who he'd seen, what fixing it had cost him. But she didn't. Instead, she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. Adrian went still for a moment, then his arms came around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice rough. "Stop apologizing," Lena whispered. "Just don't do this alone anymore." Adrian pulled back, his gaze searching hers. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." For a long moment, Adrian said nothing, and then slowly he nodded. And Lena knew, whatever came next, they were in it together. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe underwater. Lena didn't move in with Adrian, not officially, but she stopped going back to her apartment as often. Her toothbrush appeared in his bathroom. Her favorite coffee showed up in his kitchen. And somewhere along the way, his space became theirs without either of them acknowledging it out loud. It should have felt fast, reckless, but it didn't. It felt inevitable. Adrian was careful with her in ways that surprised her. He didn't pull her deeper into his world, didn't introduce her to the parts of his life that lived in shadows. But he stopped pretending those parts didn't exist. And that shift, that honesty, changed everything. One night, she woke up to find his side of the bed empty. It was 3 a.m, the apartment dark except for the faint glow of city lights filtering through the windows. Lena sat up, her heart doing that stupid anxious thing it did whenever he wasn't where she expected him to be. She found him in the living room, standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and clipped. He was speaking in that same language she didn't understand, the one he used when he didn't want her to know what he was dealing with. When he noticed her standing in the doorway, he ended the call without saying goodbye. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." Lena crossed the room and sat on the arm of the couch. "Everything okay?" Adrian hesitated, and she could see him weighing how much to tell her. "It's handled," he said finally. "That's not what I asked." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "There's a situation. Nothing you need to worry about." "Adrian." "Lena, I'm serious. It's fine." She studied him for a long moment, then stood and walked over to where he was standing. She didn't say anything, just reached out and took his hand. Adrian's grip tightened, and for a few seconds, they just stood there in the dark. I don't want you to think this is all I am, he said quietly. Lena frowned. What do you mean? This. He gestured vaguely at the phone, at the tension still sitting in his shoulders. The calls, the problems, the parts of my life I can't turn off. I don't think that. You should. Lena shook her head. You don't get to tell me what I should think. Adrian looked at her, something raw flickering in his eyes. You deserve better than this. Maybe, Lena said, but I'm still here. He didn't respond, but the way he pulled her closer said everything he couldn't. The next morning, Lena met Jess for coffee. It was the first time she'd seen her best friend in almost 3 weeks, and the guilt of that sat heavy in her chest. Jess was already at their usual table when Lena arrived, scrolling through her phone with a latte in front of her. She looked up when Lena walked in, and her expression immediately shifted. Oh my God, Jess said. You look different. Lena slid into the seat across from her. Different how? I don't know, lighter? No, that's not it. You look like you're hiding something. Lena's stomach flipped. I'm not hiding anything. Liar. Jess leaned forward, eyes narrowing. It's him, isn't it? Mystery bar guy. You've been seeing him. Lena hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. And? And what? Lena, come on. You disappeared for 3 weeks. You barely answer my texts. And now you show up looking like someone who just discovered what good sex is. So, spill. Lena's face burned. It's not like that. Okay, so it's exactly like that. Got it. Jess, I'm kidding. Mostly. Jess grinned, then her expression softened. But seriously, are you okay? Because you've been weird, and I'm trying to decide if it's good weird or bad weird. Lena exhaled slowly, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. It's complicated. Complicated how? He's not what I expected. In a good way? In a terrifying way. Jess's smile faded. Lena, what does that mean? Lena wanted to tell her, wanted to explain everything, the truth about Adrian, the danger, the way she'd walked into his world with her eyes wide open and hadn't looked back. But she couldn't, because some things, once said out loud, couldn't be unsaid. It means he's intense, Lena said carefully, and I'm still figuring out if I can handle that. Jess studied her for a long moment, then reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Just promise me you're being careful, she said. Lena nodded. I promise. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. That night, Adrian took her to a restaurant she'd never heard of. Small, tucked into a quiet corner of the city, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. The staff greeted Adrian by name, led them to a private table in the back, and disappeared without asking what they wanted. Do you own this place? Lena asked, glancing around. Adrian smiled faintly. No, but I know the owner. Let me guess. He owes you a favor. Something like that. Lena shook her head, amused despite herself. Does everyone in this city owe you a favor? Not everyone. Just most people. Enough people. The food arrived without them ordering, course after course, each one better than the last. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily in a way that still surprised her. But halfway through dinner, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. I need to take this, he said quietly. Lena nodded, and he stepped outside. She sat there for a few minutes, picking at her food, trying not to let the anxiety creep in. But when 10 minutes passed and Adrian still hadn't come back, she started to worry. She found him in the alley behind the restaurant, his phone still pressed to his ear, his free hand braced against the brick wall. His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it that made her stomach knot. When he saw her, he ended the call immediately. Everything okay? Lena asked. Adrian's jaw tightened. We need to leave. What? Why? Lena, please, just trust me. The urgency in his voice sent a chill down her spine. She didn't argue, just followed him back through the restaurant, where he dropped a stack of bills on the table without counting them, and out to the car. Adrian drove fast, his hands tight on the wheel, his gaze flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Adrian, Lena said carefully, what's going on? Someone made a move they shouldn't have. What kind of move? The kind that means I need to deal with it. Now. Lena's pulse spiked. And me? Adrian glanced at her, his expression hard. You stay at my place. Door locked. Don't answer for anyone. How long? I don't know. Lena's chest tightened. Adrian, Lena, I need you to listen to me. His voice was sharper now, edged with something she hadn't heard before. This isn't a conversation. This is me keeping you safe. So please, just do what I'm asking. She wanted to push back, wanted to demand answers. But the look in his eyes stopped her. Okay, she whispered. Adrian's shoulders dropped slightly, and he reached over, taking her hand. I'll be back as soon as I can. Promise? He squeezed her hand. Promise. But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that this time was different. Adrian dropped her off at his apartment, waited until she was inside, and left without another word. Lena locked the door, her hands shaking, and tried to calm the panic rising in her chest. She paced the apartment for an hour, checking her phone every 5 minutes, willing it to buzz with a message from him. But nothing came. At midnight, she tried calling. It went straight to voicemail. At 1, she tried again. Same result. By 2 in the morning, Lena was sitting on the floor with her back against the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, her mind racing through every worst-case scenario she could think of. And then, just after 3, the door opened. Lena scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. Adrian stepped inside, and the first thing she noticed was the blood. Not a lot, just a thin line across his knuckles, another smear on his collar, but enough to make her stomach drop. What happened? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian closed the door behind him, his expression unreadable. It's handled. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Lena's hands curled into fists. You're bleeding. It's not mine. The casual way he said it made her feel sick. Adrian, Lena, I don't want to talk about this right now. No, too bad. He looked at her, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. You don't want to push this. Why? Because you'll what? Shut me out? You're already doing that. Adrian's jaw clenched. I'm trying to protect you. By lying to me? By keeping you separate from the parts of my life that could get you killed. The words hit her like a slap. Lena stared at him, her chest heaving, her mind spinning. Then why am I here? She asked quietly. Adrian didn't answer. If you're so worried about keeping me safe, Lena continued, her voice shaking, why did you let me stay? Why didn't you just let me walk away when you had the chance? Adrian took a step toward her, his gaze locked on hers. Because I couldn't. That's not good enough. It's all I have. Lena's throat burned. Then maybe that's the problem. They stood there in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. And then Adrian did something that broke her. He crossed the room, took her face in his hands, and kissed her, desperate, raw, like he was trying to say everything he couldn't put into words. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, his breathing uneven. I love you, he said quietly. Lena's breath caught. I know I shouldn't. Adrian continued, his voice rough. I know this is a mistake, but I can't stop. And I need you to know that before you decide to leave. Lena's eyes burned. I'm not leaving. You should. I don't care. Adrian's grip tightened. Lena, I love you too, she whispered. And just like that, the last wall between them came down. The next morning, Lena woke up tangled in Adrian's sheets, his arm draped over her waist, his breathing slow and steady against her neck. For a few minutes, she just lay there, letting herself feel the weight of what they'd said to each other the night before. She loved him, and he loved her. It should have felt like a victory, like something worth celebrating. But all Lena could feel was the clock ticking down, because she knew, deep down, in a way she couldn't ignore, that this couldn't last. Not the way it was. Not with Adrian still living in the world he'd built, still carrying the weight of everything he refused to let her see. Something had to give, and she had a terrible feeling it would be him. Adrian stirred beside her, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her watching him, he smiled faintly. Morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Morning. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. You okay? Lena nodded, even though it was a lie. Lena, I'm fine. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You're a terrible liar. I learned from the best. He huffed a quiet laugh, then pulled her closer. What's going on in that head of yours? Lena hesitated, then decided to just say it. I need you to tell me the truth about something, she said quietly. Adrian's expression shifted. Okay. Last night, what you did, the person you dealt with, was it violent? Adrian didn't answer right away, and that told her everything she needed to know. Yes, he said finally. Lena's chest tightened. Did you hurt them? Yes. Badly? Adrian's jaw clenched. Lena, I need to know. He exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping. Yes, badly. Lena closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She'd known. Of course she'd known. But hearing it out loud was different. Why? She asked. Because they were going to hurt you. So you hurt them first. Yes. Lena opened her eyes, looking at him. And if I wasn't in the picture, would you have done the same thing? Adrian hesitated. Probably. So this is who you are? Yes. Lena sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. And you're okay with that? Adrian sat up too, his expression hard. I don't have the luxury of not being okay with it. That's not an answer. It's the truth. Lena turned to face him fully. Do you want to change? Adrian stared at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. I don't know, he said quietly. And for the first time since she'd met him, Lena saw the cracks. The admission hung in the air between them like smoke. Lena didn't know what she'd expected him to say. Maybe that he'd been waiting for the right moment to walk away. Maybe that he'd always planned to leave this life behind but never found the courage. But the raw uncertainty in his voice, the fact that he genuinely didn't know if he wanted to change, hit her harder than any lie would have. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. So what does that mean for us? Adrian's jaw tightened. It means I don't have an answer. That's not fair. I know. You're asking me to stay in something that doesn't have a future. I'm not asking you to stay, Adrian said quietly. I'm just not strong enough to tell you to leave. Lena's throat burned. She wanted to be angry, wanted to yell at him for being selfish, for pulling her into this mess without a plan, for making her fall in love with someone who couldn't promise her anything beyond right now. But she couldn't, because she understood. She'd walked into this knowing exactly what he was, and somewhere along the way she'd stopped caring about the exit. I need some air, Lena said, standing. Adrian didn't try to stop her, just watched as she pulled on one of his shirts and walked out onto the balcony. The city stretched out below her, bright and indifferent. Lena gripped the railing, letting the cold morning air sting her skin, trying to sort through the mess in her head. She loved him. That part was clear. But love wasn't enough. Not when the person you loved didn't know if they wanted to be saved. Behind her, she heard the door slide open. Adrian stepped out, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. You want me to leave you alone? He asked. I don't know what I want. Adrian moved closer, standing beside her. For a while, they just stood there in silence, watching the city wake up. I've been thinking, Adrian said finally. Lena glanced at him. About? About what you said, about changing. Her pulse quickened. And? Adrian exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I don't know if I can walk away completely, but I think I can start stepping back. What does that mean? It means I stop being the person everyone calls when they need something handled. I start delegating. I start building distance between me and the parts of this that are dangerous. Lena turned to face him fully. You do that? I'd try. Why? Adrian looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke her. Because I don't want to lose you, he said simply. And I know if I keep living like this, eventually I will. Lena's chest ached. Adrian, I'm not saying it'll be easy, he continued, and I'm not promising I can flip a switch and become someone else. But if there's a chance, If there's any chance I can build something that doesn't end with you getting hurt, I want to try. Lena reached out, taking his hand. You mean that? Yes. She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was honesty. Okay, she whispered. Adrian's shoulders dropped, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. And for the first time in weeks, Lena let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a shot. The shift didn't happen overnight. Adrian started small. He stopped taking calls at 3 a.m, started saying no to meetings that didn't require his presence, began handing off responsibilities to people he trusted, people Lena never met but heard mentioned in passing. It was subtle, but it was real. And Lena watched him change, piece by piece, into someone who looked less like a man holding the weight of the world and more like someone learning to let go. But not everyone was happy about it. 2 weeks after Adrian started pulling back, Lena got a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, then a man's voice, low, smooth, faintly amused. Lena Carter? Her stomach dropped. Who is this? A friend of Adrian's. Well, former friend, I suppose. Lena's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? Just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Marcus Hale, and I think you and I should have a conversation. I don't know who you are, but Adrian hasn't told you about me? Marcus laughed softly. That's interesting. I was the one who taught him everything he knows, before he decided he was too good for the life we built together. Lena's pulse spiked. I'm hanging up. Wait. Marcus's tone sharpened. I'm calling because I think you should know what you're getting into. Adrian's trying to walk away, isn't he? Trying to be someone he's not. And you're the reason. That's none of your business. It is when it affects my business, Marcus said coldly. Adrian thinks he can just step back and everything will stay stable. But it doesn't work like that. People are starting to ask questions, starting to wonder if he's gone soft. And when people start wondering, they start making moves. Lena's chest tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying Adrian's putting a target on both of you, and if you care about him, you'll convince him to stop this little redemption arc before someone else does it for him. The line went dead. Lena stood there, her hands shaking, her mind racing. She wanted to believe Marcus was bluffing, that he was just trying to scare her into pushing Adrian back into the life he was trying to leave, but the fear in her chest said otherwise. That night, Lena told Adrian about the call. He went very still, his expression darkening in a way that made her stomach knot. What did he say? Adrian asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Lena repeated the conversation word for word, watching as his jaw tightened with every sentence. When she finished, Adrian stood and walked to the window, his hands braced against the frame. I should have known he'd pull something like this, he said. Who is he? Adrian exhaled slowly. Someone I used to work with. Someone who thinks loyalty means never leaving. Is he dangerous? Yes. Lena's chest tightened. What are we going to do? Adrian turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her heart stop. We're not doing anything, he said. I'm handling this. Adrian, Lena, I need you to trust me. Marcus is trying to get in your head, and I'm not letting him. But what if he's right? What if stepping back makes things worse? Adrian crossed the room and took her hands. Then I'll deal with it, but I'm not going back to that life. Not for him. Not for anyone. Lena's throat burned. What if you don't have a choice? There's always a choice. Not always. Adrian's grip tightened. Lena, I need you to believe me when I say I'm not letting this destroy us. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Even if it means staying in a world you're trying to leave? Adrian's expression cracked, and for a moment she saw the weight of everything he was carrying. I don't know, he admitted, and that terrified her more than anything. The next few days were tense. Adrian became hyper-focused, making calls, meeting with people Lena didn't know, coming home late with the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than physical. And Lena tried to give him space, tried to be patient, but the fear was eating her alive. On the 4th night, she couldn't take it anymore. Talk to me, she said as Adrian walked through the door just after midnight. He looked at her, surprised. About what? About whatever's going on in your head. Because you're shutting me out, and I can't handle it. Adrian set his keys down, his shoulders sagging. I'm trying to figure out how to fix this without dragging you deeper into it. You keep saying that, but I'm already in it, Adrian. I've been in it since the moment I kissed you in that bar. That was different. How? Because you didn't know what you were walking into. And now I do, Lena said, stepping closer. So stop trying to protect me from the truth and just tell me what's happening. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. Marcus isn't bluffing, he said quietly. He's been making moves, talking to people I used to work with, planting doubt, trying to destabilize everything I've built. Why? Because if I walk away, it sets a precedent. It shows people they can leave, and Marcus can't afford that. Lena's stomach twisted. So what do? I make a choice. What kind of choice? Adrian's jaw tightened. Either I go back and deal with him the way I used to deal with problems, or I walk away completely and let the pieces fall where they will. And if you walk away, then Marcus wins, and everyone I've ever protected loses. Lena's chest ached. That's not fair. No, it's not. They stood there in silence, the weight of it pressing down between them, and then Lena did something reckless. What if there's a third option? She said. Adrian frowned. What do you mean? What if you don't go back and you don't walk away? What if you do something that forces Marcus to back off without you having to play his game? Like what? Lena hesitated. I don't know, but there has to be something. Some way to end this without you sacrificing everything you're trying to build. Adrian looked at her, something shifting in his eyes. You really believe that? He asked quietly. I have to. Adrian exhaled slowly, then pulled her into his arms. Okay, he whispered. Then we'll find it. And for the first time in days, Lena felt like they might actually have a chance. Over the next week, Adrian worked quietly, methodically, putting together a plan Lena only saw pieces of. He met with lawyers, with accountants, with people who owed him favors and people who didn't but respected him enough to listen. And slowly, carefully, he started dismantling the infrastructure that had kept him tied to the life he was trying to leave. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was strategic. Adrian restructured everything, shifted assets, severed connections, built walls between himself and the people who depended on him for too long. And when Marcus tried to push back, Adrian didn't fight. He just moved faster. By the end of the second week, it was done. Adrian called Lena into his office one night and showed her a folder filled with documents she didn't fully understand. What is this? She asked. Proof that I'm out, Adrian said simply. Everything I controlled is now in the hands of people who can manage it without me, and Marcus has nothing left to leverage. Lena stared at him, her chest tight. You really did it. I told you I would. But what about the people who depended on you? They'll be fine. I made sure of it. Lena's throat burned. And Marcus? Adrian's expression hardened. He'll come after me. Eventually. But by the time he does, I'll be so far removed from this world that it won't matter. You're sure? No, Adrian admitted, but I'm willing to take the risk. Lena set the folder down and crossed the room, wrapping her arms around him. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Adrian held her tightly, his voice rough. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have. Maybe. But I wouldn't have wanted to. And in that moment, Lena knew they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Adrian was choosing her, and she was choosing him back. 3 months later, Lena stood in the kitchen of a house she still couldn't believe was theirs. It wasn't in the city. It was an hour outside, tucked into a neighborhood where people actually knew their neighbors and kids rode bikes in the street without anyone worrying. The house itself was nothing fancy. 2 stories, a small yard, windows that let in too much light in the morning. But it was quiet, and it was theirs. Adrian had bought it without telling her, then handed her the keys one morning like it was the most natural thing in the world. What is this? Lena had asked, staring at the address on the keychain. A place where no one knows who I used to be, Adrian had said simply. And that was that. The move had been strange, not bad, just disorienting. Lena still worked at the nonprofit, but she'd started taking the train into the city only 3 days a week. The rest of the time, she worked from home, answering emails in sweatpants, drinking coffee on the porch, trying to figure out what her life had become. Adrian had changed too. Not overnight, not in some dramatic transformation that erased who he'd been, but slowly, quietly, he'd started becoming someone new. He didn't take calls at odd hours anymore, didn't disappear for days without explanation. He'd started cooking more, reading more, spending entire Sundays doing nothing but sitting on the couch with Lena, her legs draped over his lap, both of them too lazy to move. It should have felt perfect. But Lena knew better than to believe in perfect, because Marcus Hale hadn't disappeared. He'd just gone quiet. And that was somehow worse. Adrian never talked about it, but Lena could see the tension in his shoulders whenever his phone buzzed, the way his jaw tightened when he checked the news, the way he still locked the doors twice before bed. He was waiting for something. And so was she. One Saturday morning, Lena woke up to find Adrian already dressed, standing by the bedroom window with his arms crossed. "You're up early," she said, sitting up. Adrian didn't turn around. "Couldn't sleep." Lena's stomach tightened. She knew that tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Adrian?" He sighed, finally turning to face her. Marcus reached out. Lena's pulse spiked. "When?" "Last night." "And you're just telling me now? I didn't want to wake you." Lena threw the covers off and stood, crossing the room. "What did he say?" Adrian hesitated, then pulled his phone out of his pocket and handed it to her. The message was short, simple, and terrifying in its casualness. "We should talk, in person, just the two of us. You owe me that much." Lena's hands shook as she handed the phone back. "Are you going to meet him?" "I don't know." "Adrian, if I don't, he'll keep pushing. He'll find another way to get to me. To us. And if you do?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then maybe I can end this for good." Lena's chest ached. "Or maybe he'll try to pull you back in." "He can try." That's not reassuring. Adrian reached out, taking her hands. "Lena, I'm not going back to that life, but I can't keep running from it either. At some point, I have to face him. Then let me come with you." "No." "Adrian, Lena, no." His voice was firm, but his eyes were soft. "This is my mess, and I'm not dragging you into it." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that they were in this together, that he didn't get to shut her out now. But she knew he was right, so instead, she just nodded. "When?" "Tomorrow." And Lena's heart sank. The next day felt like waiting for a bomb to go off. Adrian left early, kissing Lena on the forehead and promising he'd be back by evening. She tried to distract herself, cleaned the house, answered emails, went for a walk that lasted all of 10 minutes before she gave up and went back inside. By noon, she was pacing. By 3, she was checking her phone every 30 seconds. And by 5, when Adrian still hadn't called, Lena was ready to lose her mind. She tried calling him. It went straight to voicemail. She tried texting. No response. And then just after 6, the front door opened. Lena's heart stopped. Adrian walked in, his face unreadable, his movement slow. He closed the door behind him and just stood there for a moment, like he was trying to figure out what to say. "Are you okay?" Lena asked, her voice shaking. Adrian nodded. "I'm fine." "What happened?" He crossed the room and sat down heavily on the couch, running a hand through his hair. "We talked." "And?" "And it's over." Lena sat down beside him, her chest tight. "What does that mean?" Adrian exhaled slowly. "It means Marcus finally accepted that I'm not coming back, that nothing he says or does is going to change that." "Just like that?" "Not just like that," Adrian said quietly. "I had to make it clear, had to show him that I wasn't bluffing, that I'd burned every bridge, severed every tie, and there was nothing left for him to leverage." "How did he take it?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "He wasn't happy, but he's smart enough to know when a fight isn't worth having." Lena studied him, searching his face for any sign that he was holding something back. "So it's really over?" "As over as it can be." "What does that mean?" Adrian looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes nearly broke her. It means Marcus won't come after me directly, but it also means I can't ever go back. Not even if I wanted to. I made sure of that. Lena reached out, taking his hand. And do you? Want to go back? No? Adrian said without hesitation. I don't. Relief flooded through her, so strong it made her dizzy. Then we're really done with this, she whispered. Adrian squeezed her hand. Yeah, we're done. And for the first time in months, Lena let herself believe it. But that night, as they lay in bed, Lena felt Adrian's tension radiating through the darkness. You're not asleep, she said quietly. Neither are you. What are you thinking about? Adrian was silent for a long moment. About what I said to him. What did you say? I told him that the person he used to know doesn't exist anymore, that I'd rather lose everything I built than go back to being that version of myself. Lena turned to face him. And what did he say? He said I was making a mistake, that people like us don't get to just walk away and pretend we're someone else. Do you believe that? Adrian's hand found hers in the dark. I used to, but not anymore. Why not? Because of you. Lena's throat tightened. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I know, but it's the truth. You made me want to be someone different, someone better. And once I saw what that could look like, I couldn't unsee it. Lena moved closer, resting her head against his chest. I didn't make you anything. You did that yourself. Maybe, but you gave me a reason to try. They lay there in silence, listening to each other breathe. Adrian? Lena whispered. Yeah? I'm proud of you. His arms tightened around her. Thank you. And somewhere in that quiet moment, Lena realized something she'd been too afraid to acknowledge before. Love wasn't about saving someone. It was about standing beside them while they saved themselves. The weeks that followed felt like learning to live again. Adrian started looking for work, real work, the kind that didn't involve late-night calls or blood on his knuckles. He talked to people he used to know, people who'd left the life before him, people who understood what it meant to rebuild from scratch. It wasn't easy. And it wasn't fast. But slowly, carefully, Adrian started putting together something that looked like a future. He ended up consulting for a security firm, legitimate, above board, the kind of place where his experience was valuable, but his past didn't matter. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And that was enough. Lena, meanwhile, had started painting again. It had been Adrian's idea. He'd come home one day with an easel, a set of brushes, and enough paint to stock a small art store, and he'd set it all up in the spare bedroom without asking. What is this? Lena had asked, staring at the setup. A reminder, Adrian had said simply, that you're allowed to want things that don't pay the bills. And just like that, Lena had fallen in love with him all over again. She painted in the mornings before work and on weekends when the light was good. Mostly landscapes at first, trees, fields, the view from their porch. But eventually, she started painting people, faces, moments, the kind of small, specific details that most people overlooked. She wasn't good at it yet, but she was getting better. And for the first time in years, Lena felt like she was building something that was hers. One evening, about 4 months after they'd moved, Lena came home to find Adrian standing in the kitchen with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. What's the occasion? She asked, setting her bag down. Adrian smiled. No occasion, I just thought we should celebrate. Celebrate what? The fact that we made it. Lena's chest tightened. Made it through what? Everything, Adrian said simply. The chaos, the fear, the part where we didn't know if this would work. Lena crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. It's working. Yeah, Adrian said quietly. It is. They drank the wine on the porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood, the air warm and still. And somewhere between the second glass and the third, Adrian asked the question Lena had been waiting for. Do you ever regret it? He said. Lena looked at him. Regret what? Staying, choosing this. Lena set her glass down and took his hand. No. Not even a little? Not even a little. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You're a terrible liar. I'm not lying. Then you're braver than I thought. Lena laughed softly. Or stupider. Maybe both. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything they'd been through settling around them like a blanket. And then Adrian said something that made Lena's heart stop. I want to marry you. Lena blinked. What? I want to marry you, Adrian repeated, his voice steady. Not because I think we need to, not because I'm trying to prove something, but because I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what it would have been like if I'd asked. Lena's throat burned. Adrian, you don't have to answer now, he said quickly. I'm not asking for a yes or a no. I'm just telling you what I want. Lena stared at him, her chest aching, her mind spinning. And then, without thinking, she said, yes. Adrian froze. What? Yes, Lena repeated, her voice stronger now. I'll marry you. Adrian's expression cracked, and for a moment he just looked at her like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. And then he kissed her, slow, careful, like he was trying to memorize the moment. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers, his breathing uneven. I don't have a ring, he said. Lena laughed, her eyes wet. I don't care. I should have planned this better. You really should have. Adrian smiled, and it was the kind of smile Lena had only seen a handful of times. Open, unguarded, completely real. I love you, he said quietly. I love you too. And just like that, the future they'd been building became something solid. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Jess as their witness and a judge who didn't ask questions. It wasn't fancy. There were no flowers, no fancy dress, no reception, just 2 people standing in front of a stranger, promising to choose each other every single day. And when the judge pronounced them married, Lena felt something shift inside her, something that had been broken for a long time finally clicking back into place. Adrian kissed her in front of the courthouse steps, his hands cupping her face, his eyes bright. How does it feel? He asked. Lena smiled, like the beginning of something good. Not the end? No, Lena said. Definitely not the end. And she meant it. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were hard days. Days when Adrian got quiet and distant. Days when Lena wondered if the past would ever really let them go. But they learned to navigate it, learned to talk through the fear instead of letting it fester. And slowly, carefully, they built a life that felt real. Adrian's consulting work grew into something steady, something he was actually good at. He helped companies assess vulnerabilities, train security teams, develop protocols that kept people safe without crossing ethical lines. It was strange at first, using the same skills that had once been deployed in shadows to now protect legitimate businesses. But Adrian was good at it, better than good. And more importantly, he slept through the night now. Lena's paintings started getting noticed. Small galleries, local shows, nothing huge, but enough to make her feel like maybe she'd been right to start again. She sold her first piece to a woman who said it reminded her of her grandmother's house, and Lena had cried in the car on the way home because someone had seen something she'd made and felt something real. They bought a dog, a scruffy mutt from the shelter who barked at squirrels and slept on their bed. They named him Biscuit because Adrian said he looked like burnt toast, and Lena had laughed so hard she'd snorted. They hosted dinners with Jess and her new boyfriend, laughing over wine and terrible homemade pasta. They took weekend trips to places they'd never been, just to see what it felt like to be tourists in their own lives. It was ordinary. And it was everything. But about 8 months after the wedding, something shifted. Lena noticed it first in the way Adrian started looking at his phone differently. Not with the old tension, but with something else. Something heavier. What's wrong? She asked one night as they sat on the couch. Adrian set his phone down. Nothing. You're doing that thing where you lie badly. He smiled faintly. What thing? The thing where you say nothing's wrong, but your entire face says otherwise. Adrian exhaled slowly, then turned to face her. I got a call today, from someone I used to work with. Lena's stomach dropped. Marcus? No, someone else, someone who got out a few years before I did. What did they want? Adrian hesitated. They're starting a foundation for people trying to leave the kind of life we used to live. Job training, legal support, housing assistance. They want me to be part of it. Lena blinked. That's good, isn't it? I don't know. Is it? Why wouldn't it be? Adrian rubbed his face. Because it means going back. Not to the life, but to the people. To the places. To everything I've been trying to forget. Lena reached out, taking his hand. What do you want to do? I want to help, but I'm scared. Of what? Of who I'll become if I'm around it again, even if it's different, even if it's for a good reason. What if being close to it pulls me back? Lena squeezed his hand. Then I'll pull you forward. Adrian looked at her, his eyes searching. You really believe that? Yes. He was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. Okay, I'll think about it. And Lena knew in that moment that whatever he decided, they'd figure it out together. 2 weeks later, Adrian said yes to the foundation. He started slow, helping with strategy, making a few calls, attending meetings that didn't require him to be in the same room as the people he used to know. But as the weeks went on, he got more involved. He started mentoring people who were trying to get out, sharing his story, offering advice that only someone who'd lived it could give. And Lena watched him transform again, not into who he used to be, but into someone new, someone who'd taken the worst parts of his past and turned them into something that actually mattered. One night, after a particularly long day, Adrian came home looking exhausted but lighter somehow. How'd it go? Lena asked. Adrian collapsed onto the couch beside her. Hard, but good. Yeah? I talked to a kid today, 19 years old, got pulled into some crew when he was 15 and didn't know how to get out. Reminded me of myself at that age. What did you tell him? That it's possible, that it's hard as hell, but it's possible, and that the life doesn't have to define him. Lena's chest ached. Do you think he believed you? I don't know, but I think I planted something, and that's enough for now. Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm proud of you. For what? For doing this. For turning something ugly into something that helps people. Adrian kissed the top of her head. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. Maybe, but I wouldn't have wanted to. They sat there for a while, wrapped up in each other, the weight of the day slowly lifting. And Lena realized something she'd been learning slowly over the past 2 years. Redemption wasn't a single moment. It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic turning point. It was a series of small choices made over and over again until the person you used to be became someone you barely recognized. Adrian was making those choices every single day, and that was the bravest thing she'd ever seen. 1 year after they got married, Lena and Adrian threw a small party at their house. It wasn't anything fancy, just Jess and her boyfriend, a few people from Adrian's new job, a couple of neighbors who'd become friends. They grilled burgers in the backyard, drank too much beer, and laughed until their faces hurt. At one point, Lena found herself standing on the porch, watching Adrian talk to one of his mentees, a young woman who'd just gotten her first legitimate job after leaving a crew that had controlled her life for 3 years. Adrian was nodding, listening intently, and the woman was smiling like she'd just been handed the world. Jess appeared beside Lena, handing her a drink. He's different, Jess said. Lena nodded. Yeah, he is. You did that. No, Lena said quietly. He did that. I just stuck around. Jess smiled. That's the same thing. Lena watched Adrian for a moment longer, then turned to her best friend. Do you remember that night? The dare? Jess laughed. Of course I do. Best terrible idea I ever had. I thought I was just going to kiss some guy and forget about it. And instead you married him and moved to the suburbs. Life's weird. Yeah, Lena said softly. It really is. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Lena and Adrian sat on the porch with mugs of tea, watching the stars come out. Do you ever think about that night? Adrian asked. Lena glanced at him. Which night? The one where you kissed me on a dare, Lena smiled. All the time. Do you regret it? Not even a little. Adrian reached over and took her hand. Good. Because I don't either. They sat in comfortable silence, the world quiet around them. And then Adrian said something that made Lena's heart swell. I used to think control was the only thing that mattered, he said quietly. That if I could just keep everything in line, I'd be safe. But I was wrong. Yeah? Yeah. The only thing that matters is this. Us. The life we're building. The people we're helping. The fact that we get to wake up every day and choose to be better than we were yesterday. Lena squeezed his hand. That's a good philosophy. I learned it from you. Liar? Adrian smiled. Maybe a little, but you made it easier to believe. They sat there for a while longer, wrapped in the kind of quiet contentment that only comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And Lena thought about everything they'd been through, the fear, the danger, the moments when it would have been easier to walk away. But they hadn't. They'd stayed. They'd fought. They'd chosen each other over and over again, even when it was hard. And that, Lena realized, was what love actually was. Not the fireworks, not the grand gestures, but the quiet, steady choice to keep showing up, even when the world tried to pull you apart. Months turned into years, and the life they'd built became the life they lived. Adrian's work with the foundation grew. He became one of their most valuable advocates, speaking at events, helping secure funding, mentoring dozens of people trying to leave dangerous lives behind. He never talked about the specifics of his own past publicly, but everyone who worked with him knew, and they respected him for it. Lena's art took off in ways she never expected. Her paintings started selling, getting featured in galleries she'd only dreamed about. She even had a small show in the city, and when Adrian showed up wearing a suit and looking proud enough to burst, Lena had to excuse herself to cry in the bathroom for 5 minutes. They didn't have kids. They talked about it once or twice, but in the end they decided they were enough. Just the two of them, and Biscuit, and the quiet life they'd carved out of chaos. It wasn't the life either of them had imagined, but it was theirs. And one evening, 5 years after that reckless dare in a crowded bar, Lena stood on the porch of their house, watching Adrian throw a ball for Biscuit in the yard, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. Not the fleeting kind that comes and goes, but the deep, steady kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Adrian caught her watching and smiled. "What?" he called. "Nothing," Lena said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how lucky I am." Adrian walked over, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Pretty sure I'm the lucky one." Lena leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "We're both lucky." "Yeah," Adrian said quietly. "We are." And as the sun set over the house they'd built together, Lena realized something she'd always known, but never fully understood. Love wasn't about finding someone who completed you. It was about finding someone who made you want to be whole on your own. Someone who saw your broken pieces and didn't try to fix them, just stood beside you while you figured it out yourself. Adrian had done that for her, and she'd done it for him. And that was the kind of love worth fighting for. The kind worth choosing every single day. The kind that turned a reckless dare into a lifetime. Because at the end of it all, life wasn't about the moments that changed you. It was about what you did with them after. It was about the choices you made when no one was watching. The people you became when the world stopped paying attention. Adrian had been someone who lived in shadows, who controlled through fear, who thought power was the only thing that mattered. And now he was someone who helped people escape those same shadows. Someone who used his past to build futures for others. Someone who'd learned that real strength wasn't about control. It was about letting go. Lena had been someone who played it safe, who let fear dictate her choices, who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something just because it made her happy. And now she was someone who created, who risked, who'd learned that the scariest thing you can do is also sometimes the most important. They'd both changed, and they'd changed together, and that was the whole point.